Harry Potter and the Chamber Pot of Mysteries. By J.K.W.M.P. White Rowling. A Harry Potter and the True Story Writes sequel. Chapter the First. Hard work and no pay make Harry something something. For about the billionth time, a squabble had broken out over first meal at number 408 on a private drive. Sir Vernon Giancarlo Drubbles Naught, P.E., Ph.D., C.P.A., first of his name, had been woken in the wee hours of the morning by a loud, snorting noise coming from his nephew Harry's basement room. 8th time this week. He bellowed across the table. "If you can't control that pig, I'll have it killed and grilled, boy." Harry, annoyed yet again, tried to make excuses for his pet pig. "She's bored," he said. "She's used to prancing around outside in the mud. If I could just take the hose to the backyard." "Do I look stupid?" snarled Uncle Vern, bits of scrambled egg spraying from his mouth as he spoke. "Know what'll happen if that pig's let out back?" He suddenly swapped lustful looks with his wife, Petunia, who just waked into the dining room from the kitchen. Harry opened his mouth to argue back, but instead of words gave a long, loud belch from deep within his stomach. The whole family turned and stared with disgusted looks. Excuse me." Mr. Drubbles Naught's eyes narrowed and gave a frown of repulsion. "I want some more of the bacon." The Drubbles Naught's son Bubba quaked, breaking the awkward silence. "All this talk of pigs makes me hungry." "Of course, dear. I brought you more," said Aunt Petunia, setting down the tray she carried right in front of her massive son. "We must bulk you up while we've got the chance, can't let the Challenger boy from Lincolnshire take your title away. And there'll be none of that for you, ya hear?" Uncle Vern snapped over to Harry. "I don't want any anyway," Harry replied. "Bacon makes me logy. I just want this oatmeal." "Oatmeal?" Uncle Vern laughed. "Oats are what a champion thoroughbred eats before he or she wins the Kentucky Derby," Harry said matter-of-factly, spooning a spoonful into his mouth. "News flash, Harry, people are not horses. Eat your bacon, boy," Mr. Drubbles Naught said, turning to Bubba. Bubba, who was so large his body fat hung low over all sides of the kitchen chair, had gained more than 230 pounds since a year ago. Even back then he was pushing the limits of what a human body could handle. And now, he's in completely new territory. "Pass me the pepper," Bubba asked of Harry. "You've forgotten the magic word," Harry replied back with a smirk. The effect of this simple sentence on the rest of the family was incredible. Bubba gave a slight jump which caused his chair to collapse underneath him with a crash that shook the whole neighborhood and gave a false earthquake alarm at the local university. Mrs. Drubbles Naught gave a loud scream and then fainted in her porridge. Mr. Drubbles Naught jumped to his feet, large blue and red veins throbbing all over his face. "You all heard what I said," said Harry with a frustrated tone. "You dare utter that word?" roared his uncle, much more bits of egg spraying all over the table, "saying the M word in our house?" "Yup. This means war, boy," roared Uncle Vern, picking up his steak knife. "You want a war, old man, you got it," Harry growled. "I warned you. I will not tolerate even the mention of your evil abnormality under this roof." Harry stared from his blue-faced uncle to his quite pale aunt, who was still passed out in her bowl. It didn't look like she was breathing. You want to check on that?" said Harry, pointing over to his aunt. Uncle Vern dropped the knife and immediately reached out and pulled his wife's head up by her hair. She gave a loud wheeze and coughed up some porridge. Bringing Aunt Petunia back from the grave seemed to de-escalate the situation. An escalation that seems to happen almost every day since Harry had come home for the summer holidays. Uncle Vern had it out for Harry because, for you see, Harry Potter wasn't a normal boy. As a matter of fact, he was about as not normal as it is possible to be. Harry Potter was rich, very rich. He had a huge bank vault full of gold safely hidden away under the streets of London. and Harry was quite popular too, at least with his own kind. But the Drubblesnorts knew nothing of this. He also happened to be a wizard, or at least a wizard in training wheels, fresh from a successful first year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft, and like tomfoolery, he was told he doesn't get to use the full wizard title until after he graduates. And it was this that the Drubblesnorts were so unhappy about and freaked them out. Harry likewise felt impossibly loathsome about having to spend his summer days with these people. He craved Hogwarts so much it was like having constant hunger. He didn't miss the actual castle though, with its drafty, secret passageways that got you lost, or his dreadful classes, especially Snape's, the potions boss, not to mention many irritating ghosts that pop in on you at the worst times, such as when you were taking a shower or when you were doing other things. But it was the people which made up the school that he enjoyed. His people. At Hogwarts he was a celebrity and could do no wrong. Sure, there was the constant annoyance of the head sanitation officer, Hagrid, asking for a visit to his cabin next to the Forbidden Forest, dare Harry even say creepy. To one Ronald Weasley always hanging around him, lurking and offering so-called advice. However, there were many others that adored him and treated Harry as a god, and he loved it. And then there were the legendary dormitory parties, the hearty multi-course banquets in the Great Hall each night, and, especially, Quidditch, the most popular sport in the wizarding world, and it isn't even close. 6 tall goal posts, 4 flying balls, and 14 players on broomsticks for the ill-informed. All Harry's spell books, his wand, medieval robes, his golden cauldron, his pig and top-of-the-line nincompoop 2002 broomstick had been locked in a shed out back where Harry used to live by Uncle Vern the instant Harry had come home. Harry didn't mind all too much though. This gave him a valid excuse for why he wouldn't have practiced all summer for the house Quidditch team, not that he needed it, or for when Harry went back to school without any of his summer homework done. Uncle Vern had even padlocked Harry's pig, Pigwiggy, inside her cage, to stop her from making a mess of the house and the yard. This of course made her squeal constantly. The Drubblesnorts were what wizards called moles, not a drop of midi-chlorians in their veins, and as far as they were concerned, having a wizard in the family was an utter embarrassment, so they kept Harry locked away from the world too. Harry looked nothing like the rest of the family. He was small and scrappy, with neon green eyes and jet black hair that was always a complete mess. He wore round glasses, and on his forehead was a thin scar in the shape of a smiley face smile. Uncle Vern by contrast was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, huge hands and a very large. Well, let's not go there again. Aunt Petunia was hideously horse-faced with an abnormally long neck and nothing but skin and bones. Then there was Bubba, blonde, pink, and extremely porky. In fact, he was just awarded a Guinness World Record for being the heaviest 11-year-old ever a few weeks ago. The whole township came out for a celebration in his honor. Harry, naturally, was locked away in the basement, banned from participating in any of the festivities. But it was Harry's scar that made him so predominantly extraordinary, even for a magic man. This scar was Harry's claim to fame and a validation of his very peculiar past, the reason he had been abandoned on the Drubblesnorts doorstep 11 years hence. At the ripe old age of 1, Harry had defeated the greatest and darkest sorcerer since Adolf Hitler, the Reverend Lord Voldemort, whose name most witches and wizards still cower in fear when spoken out loud. Harry's parents had died very undramatically in Voldemort's sneak attack after they fell behind on their mortgage, but Harry had escaped with his life and his newly forged smiley face scar, and somehow, everyone was pretty sure they knew why Voldemort's powers had been obliterated the instant he had come into contact with Harry. People whispered Harry was a god with immense powers far grander than Lord Voldemort could ever hope for, who came to this world to deliver them from evil. Banquets were held all over the land in his honor. There is even an official Harry Potter Day sanctioned by the Ministry of Magic to commemorate that fateful day. But Harry knew none of this until quite recently, as he had been fostered by his dead mother's sister and her husband. He had spent 10 years with the Drubbles-Noughts, never understanding why they treated him like scum and worked him like a slave. He kept on believing the Drubbles-Noughts' story that he had got his scar in a freak circus accident that had killed his parents when the elephants trampled them on one of the circus balls that hit him in the noggin. And then, precisely a year ago to this very day give or take, Hogwarts had transcribed a letter to Harry, and thus set in motion a series of events that culminated with the whole true story being disclosed. Harry had taken up his rightful place at the wizard's school, where he and his scar were famous and rich. His parents' hefty double wizard's life insurance policy payout was quite substantial and compounded with 10 years' interest to boot. But now the school year was over, and he was duped into going back with the Drubbles-Noughts for the summer, back to what was once his normal life of being treated like dirt and everybody's punching bag and workhorse. Today of course was Harry's 12th birthday. The Drubbles-Noughts clearly did not remember. Harry almost forgot himself, but seeing his aunt on the brink of death jogged his memory. The Drubbles-Noughts were unsure of Harry's actual birthday of course. He was left with no birth certificate or any indication of when he was born. They simply guessed, and Harry never realized this little detail of his existence or that he was completely invisible in the eyes of the British government. But at that moment, after confirming Aunt Petunia was okay, Uncle Vern cleared his throat importantly and said, "Now, all know of course how vitally essential today is." Harry peeked up, hardly daring to believe it. The almost all-out brawl now seemed like a distant memory to his uncle. Things had never de-escalated so fast before. "This may perhaps very well be the day I make the hugest deal of my lifetime," said Uncle Vern. Harry went back to his oatmeal, bored. He heard this speech before. Uncle Vern was chatting about the absurd dinner party he'd been planning and has been talking non-stop about it since the day he got back from school. Some rich billionaire and his wife were coming to dinner and Uncle Vern was hoping to get a huge order from him. Uncle Vern's company made automatic hunting rifles. "I think we should run through the schedule one more time," said Uncle Vern, pulling out a large poster board from under the table with a map of the house on it and Velcro-ed names scattered about. "We should all be in our precise position at precisely 8 o'clock. Petunia, you will be dash." "In the solarium, darling," said Aunt Petunia promptly, waiting with a tray of drinks filled with brandy to graciously accept them to our humble abode. "Good, yes. And Bubba?" "I'll be waiting to open the door in my long tailcoat tuxedo." Bubba put on an olive twist accent. "Oh there, may I take your jacket, Skovner?" "It's the middle of summer, they won't have any coats," sniveled Harry. Yes, good point," said Uncle Vern under his breath. "Better take their car keys instead, Bubba. Billionaires always have chauffeurs to scurry their butts around, they never touch keys," Harry thought to himself. Then Uncle Vern rounded on Harry. "And you? What's your role in all this, boy?" "I'll be in the kitchen slaving away to make a fine gourmet meal for our guests, producing no noise at all and pretending I'm not there," said Harry with a very monotone voice. "Exactly," said Uncle Vern spitefully. "That's what the help does. Alrighty, changing subjects, when they arrive I will lead them into the solarium, introduce you, Petunia, and hand out them drinks. At 9:45. I'll announce dinner," proclaimed Aunt Petunia with excitement. "And boy'd better be all ready by then," Uncle Vern pointed to Harry. "And you Bubba, what's your line?" "May I lead you through to the feasting room, Mrs. Branson?" said Bubba, offering his fat flubby arm to an unseeable woman. "My flawless little aristocrat," sniffed Aunt Petunia. "And you?" said Uncle Vern savagely to Harry. "I'll be in the kitchen slaving away to make a fine gourmet meal for our guests, producing no noise at all and pretending I'm not there," said Harry drearily. "Precisely, neither seen nor heard. Should have sent you off to that Milford school, would have been good practice for this and for the rest of your entire life. Now then, we must inject as many pleasant compliments as we can at dinner. Petunia, any notions? Did you have plastic surgery to become that attractive, Mrs. Branson? Vern tells me you're a wonderful pilot, Mr. Branson. Sir Branson, Petunia. How many times must I tell you he's been knighted? Okay, Bubba. How about when I grow up, I want to have all 20 ladies swooning over me at all times, just like you, Sir Branson. This stood too much for both Aunt Petunia and Harry. Aunt Petunia erupted into tears of joy and hugged her son, while Harry dropped his spoon on purpose so he could duck under the table and hide his laughter. And you, boy? Wait, where did he go? Harry fought to keep a straight face as he emerged, but it was no use. I'll be, in there, kitchen, ha, slaving away to make a fine, gourmet meal for our guests, producing no noise at all, and pretending I'm not there, hiss, he said with chuckles forcibly held back after every word. All too right, you will, said Uncle Vern insistently. The Bransons don't know anything about you and we're going to keep it that way. They must have 20 or more servants waiting on them at their home. We want to make sure they have the same experience here and think you're hired help. When dinner's over, you take Mrs. Branson back to the solarium for crumpets, Petunia, and I'll randomly bring up the subject of rifles, casually of course. With any luck, I'll have the deal of the century signed and sealed before the news at 10. Be shopping for a new vacation home in Dubai this time tomorrow, just you watch. Harry couldn't feel too excited about this. He was under the impression that Dubai was nothing more than a desert wasteland. Oh, how wrong he was. Right, I'm off into town to pick up the tailcoat tuxedos for Bubba and me. And you, he snarled at Harry. You stay out of your aunt's way while you clean up the whole house. I don't want to see a speck of dust anywhere by the time I get back. You hear me? Not one speck. Harry left into the kitchen where he put on his pink apron, grabbed a sponge and bucket and began to scrub the floor. Under his breath he sang. Happy birthday to myself. Happy birthday to myself. No cards, no presents, no special meals, no candles to blow out, not even birthday spankings, not to mention he would be spending the evening pretending to not exist. He gazed sadly up at the ceiling. He had only felt so lonely once prior, when his uncle locked him in his shed for many weeks the summer before. Harry missed his groupies. He was even at the point of missing Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. They, however, clearly didn't miss him at all. Neither of them had written to him all summer, even though Ron had said he was going to ask Harry to come and stay with him. Though Harry vaguely recalled declining the invitation before they parted ways for the summer, and now wishes he hadn't. Numerous times, Harry had been at the breaking point of breaking into Pigwiggy's cage using magic and sent her to the Ministry of Magic checking to see if anyone had written to him and his mail wasn't being forwarded properly, but it wasn't worth the risk. Wizards in training wheels weren't allowed to use magic outside of school. What Harry didn't realize was that a crowbar would have the same effect. Magic wasn't necessary. The Drubblesnaughts knew about Harry's magic ban too. Letters were sent to all legal guardians explaining the rules prior to the students being sent home. Of course they thought it was all just a cop-out to hide the truth that everything was just a grand illusion. Hogwarts was a fake school teaching fake tricks. Show us some of that fancy magic they taught you. No? What's that? You're not allowed? Oh, too bad then. What would he give now for a message from Hogwarts? From any witch or wizard? His right arm, for starters. He wished he could catch just a single glimpse of his best friend, Draco Malfoy. Until then he would just have to appear in his dreams. Not that his entire year at Hogwarts was all fun and games and learning magic card tricks. At the culmination of last term, Harry had come head-on, pun intended, with none other than the Dark Lord himself, Monsieur Voldemort. Voldemort might be a fraction of his former self, but he was still disturbing, still crafty, still determined to kill Harry Potter. Harry had slithered through Voldemort's clutches for a second time, though even now, weeks later, Harry consistently woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat, wondering if Voldemort was approaching the house from across the lawn, remembering his creepy face, his massive, mud eyes. Harry suddenly sat upright on his knees. He had been staring absent-mindedly up at the ceiling, not doing his work, and someone was approaching the kitchen. An enormous figure had emerged from the shadow of the hallway. "You boy, what day is this?" Bubba shouted, waddling toward him. Harry blinked. "What?" said Harry, not understanding what type of question this was. "I know what today is, you probably forgot," Bubba said, coming right up to him with a poke on the forehead. "I do too, it's Tuesday," said Harry. "What of it?" "Today's your birthday," snickered Bubba. "Where are all your presents? You don't have any friends at that weird place you call a school?" "Don't you know how to stop eating?" Harry said coolly. Bubba coughed and hitched up his trousers, custom-made pants that were just a bit too big even for him. His parents anticipated he'd grow out even more. "Why are you staring at the ceiling?" he said suspiciously. "I'm trying to decide what would be the best spell to set the house on fire," said Harry. Bubba staggered backward at once, a look of terror on his plump face. "You see, can't, Dad said you're not allowed to do magic, he said he'll chuck you out of the window if you do, and you haven't got anywhere else to go if you survive, you'll be homeless, you have to stay with us, you haven't got any friends." "Hidgetus fidgetus," said Harry in a menacing voice. "Zumbakazing, hockety pockety wockety whack, abra-abra-dabra-knack." "Mew-mew-mew-um," shrieked Bubba, tripping over his fat feet as he rushed back the way he came. "Mew-mew-um. He's doing it." Harry paid dearly for that little moment of amusement. Neither Bubba nor the house was hurt in any way, but that didn't stop Aunt Petunia from taking a good aim at his head with the soapy frying pan she picked up in the sink soon after Bubba scampered down the hallway. Then she gave him work to do, with the promise he wouldn't eat again until he'd finished. Trivial things a list a mile long, such as mowing the lawn with a pair of scissors, licking the staircase banister clean with his tongue, and retarring the roof. While Bubba lolled around watching his favorite TV program and eating ice cream, Harry watched in the hot summer day outside as he cleaned the windows, washed the hammer, de-weeded the flower beds, pruned and watered the roses, and repainted the whole house. The sun radiated overhead, scorching every area exposed, which was substantial since Harry worked in shorts and no shirt. He knew he shouldn't have taken Bubba's bait, but Bubba had a point. Maybe he didn't have any friends at Hogwarts and they were all phonies. Wish they could see famous Harry Potter now, he thought as he savagely spread manure on the flower beds, his back hurting, piles of sweat running down his face. It was 7:30 in the evening when he heard Aunt Petunia calling him. "Get in here, time to start prepping for dinner. And walk on the plastic." Harry moved gladly into the shade of the gleaming kitchen. "Make it quickly. The Bransons will be here soon," snapped Aunt Petunia, handing Harry recipes for crown roast of pork with mushroom dressing, bacon-wrapped pesto beef tenderloin, duck breasts with apricot chutney, 3-berry salsa, roasted cabbage slaw with hazelnuts and lemon, cider glazed Brussels sprouts, roasted Dijon potatoes, and for dessert, ginger layer cake with wine, poached pears and cream cheese frosting. She was already wearing a bright pink cocktail dress and looked all dolled up. Way too dolled up. Harry washed his hands, put his pink apron on again and got to work on this magnificent supper. Not a moment after he started, he dropped the beef tenderloin on the floor. Luckily, Harry thought, he had just cleaned that floor so good you could eat off it. Little did he know then how true those words would become. "They'll be here any second, chop chop." His aunt didn't seem to notice the slip-up, so he slipped the beef slab back into the pan. As his aunt walked through the door towards the solarium, Harry caught a glimpse of Uncle Vern and Bubba in bow ties and tailcoat tuxedos. He had only just put the crown roast in the oven when the doorbell rang and Uncle Vern's poked his furious ugly face in the kitchen. "Remember, boy, not one sound." Harry nodded silently and went to work on preparing the roasted cabbage slaw. He walked over to the pantry for some lemon juice. Trouble was, something stooped inside when he opened the door.